Good evening and welcome to Inside Government, a show brought to you by Cayuga Community College. It's shown on Spectrum, Verizon, Fios, as well as ARMA, the Auburn Regional Media Access, and Win 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. We are delighted to have in the studio today the new chairman of the Cayuga County Legislature, an independent, Jonathan Anna, who was here about 15 months ago in a forum and has been catapulted in as the new chairman effective in January. He takes over a legislature that's got a lot on its plate right now. They got budgetary issues, which everybody seems to have, but more importantly, they have the temporary closure of the county office building. Talk a lot about those things, some other things. Finish off with your goals for the next coming year, but more importantly, let people know who you are because, by the way, you're in charge. So congratulations and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Guy.
So the most broad question there can be, how'd you end up here?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, I often joke that the other 10 know something I didn't, you know, and now I've kind of figured it out.
Did you go to the men's room? Did you step out of the room? And they
right, they drew straws and I drew the short stick, you know.
Yeah, go out and get a pizza for us, and when we come back, you'll have some better news.
Exactly.
So what happened?
No, in all seriousness, you know, former Chair Aileen McNabb Coleman decided that she did not, determined that she wasn't going to seek the chair position. So, you know, there's been conversation, and I'm fortunate enough that my colleagues entrusted me with the job for the year, so I'm very fortunate and thankful.
So were you planning to run if she ran?
Had she been running for chair, no, I wasn't planning on running. This was, you know, there was no coup, there was nothing set up. It was just the fact that she announced to the legislature and the caucus that she had decided not to.
For those who may not know, were you unanimously elected?
I was.
Because nobody else.
Well, I think there was interest. I don't
because
think
I was going to say.
Yeah, I'm not saying I was the only one that was interested. I know there was some interest, but at the end of the day, you know, it took conversations and talking to fellow legislatures and meeting as a group and determining, you know, who we felt that, or as a legislature felt that they could fall behind and work with, and so.
So, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but you are somewhat of an oddity in this particular stage. You're the first independent, to the best of my recollection, at least since the 1970s, who's been chair.
Oh, wow. See, I didn't know that. But
so and you're also one of only 3 that I can remember who were elected chair within a year and a half of being elected for the first time. I think David Gould, Roger Mills, and you.
Yeah.
So.
And a lot of those had experience already in government. I mean, David Gould was a sheriff. I came out of nowhere from a nobody to be elected and then be appointed chair. And it is a very humbling honor, and I'm very, very honored for it.
So how did you put the coalition together to be unanimously? Because that you had caucused, am I correct, with the Democrats on occasion?
Yep.
Which meant that you went to their caucus meetings.
Correct.
Didn't mean that you necessarily followed their direction, but you went to their meetings. So how did you bring the legislature's 7-4?
It's set. Well, there's
6-4-1.
Correct. You have, well, there's 7 that caucus with the Democrats, right? And then you have the 4 that caucus with the Republicans.
Which includes Hans Petcher.
Hans Petcher is a conservative. Yep. And then you have Ben Vitale, who's an independent, and then myself, who's an independent Democrat.
So how'd you bring everybody together?
Well, you know, at the end of the day, it wasn't really, I can't say it was really just me. I think at the end of the day, it was about uniting this legislature together. And I hadn't really seriously thought about it. I know our caucus was working out details, and there was some discussion about who would be supported, but at the end of the day, it's all about being able to get 6 votes. So I was contacted towards the end of the process, you know.
It's basic math, isn't it?
It is, 6. Right? You got to get to 6. So
especially since you don't have weighted voting like you used to.
Correct. So Mark Strong actually reached out to me at the end and just
Republican represents Moravia, southern part.
Correct, and he's the minority leader.
Okay.
So he reached out to me and says, "Have you considered running for chair?" And I told him, Mark, I said, "Well, it's not something that's been seriously discussed, but we are having the conversations on our caucus." And his side, you know, he told me that had I decided to run, that they'd be happy to support me in the chair seat. And I took that information back to members of my caucus, and that opened up further conversation.
Some technical questions that aren't too hard. You had Steve Lynch, who was in the job of, whether we want to call it county administrator or county manager, there's some legal definitions there we won't get into.
Closer to administrator, but yes, you're right.
He is not there, and there's nobody filling that position. We'll get into that maybe a little later. Does that mean you are the chief operating officer for the county?
Currently, that is correct.
How many hours are you putting in?
Well, every day I work, so it's a 24/7 job. Currently,
and it is considered, is it forgetting the Steve Lynch piece and the administrator, is it a full-time job as chair or not?
Well, it's considered, I consider it a full-time job with part-time pay.
Okay.
So that's how I
great.
look at
Okay.
it, you know.
Is it what you expected time-wise?
You know, I knew it would be time-consuming. It's a little more time-consuming, but right now there's a lot of moving parts going on, right? And I think that maybe played in why, you know, after you're a chair for several years or you see what's coming up in the future, realizing the time commitment it takes. When I'm in Auburn, I'm spending at least 12 hours a day when I come down from Sterling here at the office.
Which is its own 45-minute drive.
Correct.
to
So,
stop.
you know, I leave the house around 7 in the morning. I get home between 8 and 9 o'clock at night. But you know, it's where I want to be. I love it. You know, I care about this county. I care about the people, and I'm looking forward to this opportunity. I think Cayuga County is in a perfect position. And people look at me like I'm crazy because they're like in a perfect position, but we really are. You know, I mean, I know where we were in '24. I know where we are now, and I know where we want to go. And right now, if you look at us geographically, we sit between Syracuse and Rochester, and we have exciting things taking place in our community. We have a hospital now that's just expanded into opened up their own cancer center, and they're going from being a local hospital to becoming more of a regional hospital. Many of the folks that are coming to Auburn Hospital aren't necessarily coming here from Auburn area. They're coming from Syracuse and Rochester. Why? Because their healthcare providers aren't able to service them in those locations, so we're becoming more of a regional source. And I think that's important. This area we're living right now, you know, people want to talk about a housing crunch. We are primed for housing to move in. I'm excited about the grant opportunity that we put together between the city and the county.
This is the one on Dunning Ave, Bluefield Manor.
Exactly, yes, sir.
You approved that on Thursday?
Just on Thursday,
Okay.
right. And this was presented to me back in, I had met with the mayor, I had met with Jenny Hayes and Jeff Digert, and this was back in January, and they presented this to me. And I took the idea back, looked into it, and I said, this is something we need here in Cayuga County. This is something that we can do. It's a viable, shovel-ready project. The state has grants available for housing and infrastructure, and we were able to put a pass-through grant onto the city from the county in a form of $1 million without any cost to the county. And when I mean no cost to the county, I went to our planning department and I said, this is happening at no cost, correct? And they said, yeah, they're reimbursing us for our application fee. I said, well, time out. I want no cost to the county. Who's keeping track of your time? And our planning department said to me, you want us to keep track of your hours? I said, absolutely, call the developer. I want reimbursement for your time on this. They called the developer, we were able to be reimbursed for our time. So this is truly a no cost to the county, and we're going to reap the economic benefits of it by taking a piece of land that is currently municipal owned, put it back on the tax rolls either through property taxes or a pilot, and then you have families coming in with 70 units, allowing for that economic development money in the form of sales tax as well, revenue coming into the county and the city. I think it's a win-win for everybody.
So I want to get into some specifics about the government, but this is your first time, other than the forum, to talk about yourself, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So before you were a legislator, what did you do?
So I spent 20 years as a police officer for the Onondaga County Sheriff's Office.
And what did you do for them?
Well, I worked on the Road Patrol Division. I spent 17 of my 20 years in the crimes unit. And then later on, that crimes unit also developed into being the motor vehicle reconstruction unit as well. We did some fire investigation as well, but I focused on both crime scene and crash. So I was a crash reconstructionist and focused on that area.
When did you leave? When did you retire?
I retired in January of 2019.
And between then and now, or when you were elected to the legislature, are you doing anything in between?
Yeah, I did a whole lot in between. I took some time off because I never thought I wanted to go back to work. Did I think I'd be sitting here with you today as chair? Absolutely not. I didn't even think I'd be sitting with you today as a legislator. Truthfully, I took the first half of the year off. My son and I actually packed up the camper. I spent 2 years preparing, and we did a trip across the country, Glacier, Yellowstone. We went all the way.
And he's how old now?
Well, he's now 17, but he would have been 12 at the time.
Okay.
11 or 12, I'm sorry. And
he goes to Red
he goes to Red
School.
Creek Central School.
Okay.
Yep, we live in Fairhaven or Sterling. And he's
And
a
are
Red
you
School
originally
student.
from Cayuga County?
I'm not. I'm originally from Oswego County.
Where'd you were born, obviously, we were talking
Yep.
a little bit in Syracuse at the hospital,
Yep.
but where was your family from originally up in?
Well, so I was actually raised in Phoenix, Pennellville. My parents are actually from Western New York.
Okay.
They're from Buffalo, Attica, Genesee County, Wyoming County, Erie County, those areas there. My father actually relocated to, he worked for Sperry New Holland back in the 70s, and they were out of New Holland, Pennsylvania. And the closest he could get back home was actually Liverpool, New York, at their regional office. So that's how I ended up in the Oswego County.
And where'd you go to school?
Well, I went to school at a place called Faith Baptist. It was a small private school. And then I went on to Cedarville University, which is a small, well, it's not too small, but it's a private liberal arts college in Ohio.
So you get a lot of stuff on your plate.
Yeah.
Let's take the one that people are talking about the most, and that's the county office building.
Sure.
So the building has been closed.
Mm-hmm.
Where is everything right now? Because some stuff is in flux, as I understand
Sure.
it.
Yeah. So right now, let's talk about 160, which is the county office building. It's been closed since, I believe, April of last year.
Okay.
End of April, beginning of May. We are in the process right now. The former chair, Lee McNabb Coleman, and her team spent some time getting together properties and determining spaces for people to go to. We're in the process now of the finally implementing that process.
So let's talk about individual properties as we go. So the one that has garnered the most attention is 63 Genesee Street, which is the old HSBC, Marine Midland, play space, whatever, the bunker, doesn't matter what you want to call it, but next to Nolan's.
Yes.
So there is, last time I looked, and that most likely was in the last week, there was a dumpster in front. Has that work been completed that you've moved in?
So we have not moved in. The work is moving along. We are in the final stages of the work. And I do have a timeline as far as moving in, but I have yet to share that with department heads or the legislature, but I'll be making that announcement next month for a move-in date.
And do you think that will be before July 1st?
Yes.
Okay. And so that deal is signed and that is in place?
That was signed in place prior to me becoming chair.
Okay. I was walking around the other day here up on our campus and I ran into a county employee who was installing phones.
Yeah.
So I take it, though there's been no official announcement, workforce development, which you spoke at the old Cornell site behind us. You were there at the end of January. Those individuals have moved out, as well as Cornell Cooperative Extension.
Right.
Is the county moving in there?
So I'd really like to take a moment to thank Dr. Durant.
Okay.
You know, he made this space available to us. It is beneficial to both the county and the college. That contract I signed last month, and we are in the process now moving into the old E&T space.
So what will go there?
Okay, so to give you an idea, we'll have our planning department in there, we'll have our HR department in there, purchasing, IT, but more importantly, we're going to put our county clerk in there for right now.
So I know Brian Scanlon, the county clerk, had been concerned through most of last year about the whole issue of people coming in and out to register motor vehicles.
Right.
That has a offshoot to the county budget because of revenues. Will that solve all of his space needs?
Yes, for the interim.
Okay.
The only space need it won't solve is our Department of Motor Vehicles. That's separate from the county clerk's office.
And where will that go?
We're still evaluating spaces for that.
Okay, so I'm not going to be able to walk downstairs from my office and get my enhanced driver's license.
Well, you can. You just have to go to the sheriff's office over on Pump House Road.
So with 63 Genesee, the HSBC building, with the workforce development, which is the rotunda here on campus, what is left to place? You obviously have motor vehicles over at the sheriff's department now. Are you still in need of space? I know the county legislature itself is up at the Karpinski. You're meeting at the Ag Museum.
Meeting at the Ag Museum.
By the way, where's your office?
So my office is actually at 2 State Street with the Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, so what's in? Okay, so you're all over the place.
Right, we are. Myself, the county attorneys, the clerk of the legislature.
So Fred Westfall, everybody's over there.
Our budget director, we're all at 2 State Street right now, and we'll continue there for at least the next 6 months.
So which leads to the question about what about the building? So what about the building? So where are you in the process of getting 160 Genesee Street back online?
Okay, fair question. So this month we have a lot of activity going on at 160. We're going to start with a new round of air quality test to reaffirm that the first floor and basement are clear of contamination. Now I do want to emphasize that this area has always been negative, but we haven't been in the building for a while.
And there's nobody in the building
There's
now?
no one in the building now.
Okay.
So before we go in and start removal of items out of the first floor, we're going to do a second round of testing, another round of testing,
First
just
floor,
to
because
ensure.
that's where the county clerk is.
That's where the county clerk is. That's where the books are. That's where the titles are for the title companies. And those are material that we have to remove out of the building. And Brian needs them. Our county clerk needs those books in order to do business as well. So we're going to be taking care of that during the month of March. The testing will be actually the testing is taking place next week.
Okay.
We also have to remove files from several offices within the building. We've identified a couple floors that have pertinent items. We'll be taking care of what we have a company coming in, and Sesslers and Colliers and Loziers, they're all doing this work, but they come in, they build decontamination centers, and they're going to come in and retrieve items of importance for us that we've identified that we need in the immediate future, and that'll be taking place as well.
So the big question has been, and part of it is driven by the 63 Genesee Street lease discussion.
Correct.
Is, will you, you're moving everything, when do you expect to be back in 160, or is there a possibility you won't be in as the building is currently structured?
So that's the other thing we have to look at, right? That's the other big question. And so also this month, we'll be having an investigation being done to determine the cause and origin of where the vermiculite has materialized from. And that'll go a long ways in answering our question about how much the cost is going to be to clean the area or to the abatement cost, right? So those are things we really have to determine what the cost and the scope is of the cleanup and the abatement of the material. Once we have that number, that'll determine, I can present to the legislature, and we can determine the course of action we wish to take with the county office building. Right now, Guy, all options are still on the table. The options to keep the county office building and rehab the interior of it. I think there's options to look at going somewhere else. I think we have to maintain a scope that allows us to look at all the options prior to making a decision. And I hope to have enough information to bring that forward to the legislature in June or July.
I think you're the 6th chairman who sat in that chair, and all 6 have talked about 160 Genesee Street. At this point, it almost sounds like a Gordian knot, that it's so intertwined. Is there a possibility that you can have this all resolved before your lease, your first lease, is up with 63 Genesee Street?
That depends on the decision the legislature chooses moving forward.
Is this your highest priority right now?
It is one of the highest priorities.
Okay.
I think when I came in January, one of the things I wanted to avoid was to be singularly focused. So I believe that we can not be singularly focused and tackle more than one thing at once. So looking at the whole picture, this is at the top of the priority list, but without neglecting the other things in county government that are taking place.
So there is a possibility, because there's a renewal clause with 63. Who's moving into 63?
So 63 right now has DSS, which is
Okay.
basically all of our social services,
Okay.
along with the treasurer's office and finance department.
And so there is a possibility of extending, is it another 3 years or 5 years? I can't
No,
remember.
the end of the lease calls for a 5-year renewal.
So you have to make a decision at some point in the next 18 months.
Those are not terms that are very favorable.
Well, and that's been part of the criticism
Yeah.
of that property, has been that. But you're moving forward with that pathway.
We are
and-
moving forward, and we'll cross some of those bridges when we get there. But I think you have to be forward thinking too. So next year, when we're already a year into this lease, we have to be looking forward. We can't wait to the end to make a decision.
Do you see you're making a decision on some of this property by the end of this calendar year?
I don't see that happening
Okay.
by the end of this calendar year.
So I mentioned DMV revenues.
I
Oh, go
would
ahead.
like to say that I would like to make a decision on 160 prior to the end of this calendar year. As you discussed with the leases
Right.
terminating, I think we have to make a decision.
That's what I mean. I'm sorry.
Right, I'm sorry. If
I-
you're speaking about 160, the answer
Yes.
is yes.
Okay.
As far as 160 goes, which is our county office building, that building I would like to have some sort of direction from the legislature by this summer.
And a viewer question. Nobody's in the building, so
Right.
why are the lights on the second floor and the back southwest corner of the
I've
building?
asked the same question. My understanding is they don't have an option right now to turn them off.
Okay. People are
So-
just saying, if you're not
No,
in there, why?
and I've asked the same question, so trust me.
So on the revenue side,
Mm-hmm.
have you seen a decline, because you've had to move motor vehicles around, have you seen a decline in the revenue on that which does go to your bottom line.
Yeah, my understanding is there's been a slight drop off, but nothing too concerning. If you remember, a lot of folks do their transactions still online.
Right.
And the state now allows us to get the same dollars
Which
online.
is a change.
Correct, it is a
from
change.
couple years ago.
It is, and that's been, for us in this situation, it's been a game changer.
So what's the state of the county's finances? You're not into you haven't completed your first full quarter. Frankly, you're only 2 months in.
Right.
Where do you stand right now between revenues and expenses and your expectations?
Well, our sales tax revenue started the year a little off. They were lower than we expected, but they picked back up in February. The state's forecasting about a 2% increase in sales tax revenue for
And is
year
that what
over
you
year.
budgeted?
I'd have to ask our budget director.
Okay.
I don't think we went up a full 2%, Guy. I know she put, I think it was 700,000 additional in, but I don't know the percentage.
So you approved a budget, the legislature, you were not
Correct.
chair,
Right.
Approved a budget back in December. It did have some personnel cuts in there, but those were not made immediately, correct?
Several of those cuts were put off until April 1st.
What type of jobs are they?
One was with the Emergency Management Office, one was in the Planning Department, and we have two that are clerk workers with DMV.
And are they positions for the most part that are all currently held by people?
They were. There was other cuts, but those were the positions that were held by people. My understanding is only one person actually remains.
And so do you expect those cuts to be implemented April 1st, or?
I believe those cuts will still be implemented on
Okay.
April 1st.
I want to ask you a quick question about, we talked about the new housing development on Dunning Ave and Bluefield, which you mentioned. A lot of people link that to Micron. I know Micron is a big talk around here. We're asking this of all the government officials who are here. There's also talk from Washington, or talk in Washington, that the new administration might not allow those guarantees that were put in place. Do you have any worries about that at this stage?
You know, I have enough worries with the county that I can't control what the federal government's going to do, right? But at the end of the day, you have to recognize that the county, we provide the services that the state tells us we're supposed to maintain, right? We provide these mandated services. And currently, many of these mandated services are funded either 100%, 66%, or 33% from
So
both
that's the
state and
bigger
federal
worry.
budget. Those are the bigger worries for me.
Okay.
The worry is how the funding at the state level, if they cut off the state of New York, that's going to flow downhill and eventually fall to us.
Are you, it's so early, what the new administration's in place, 6 weeks?
Right.
Are you planning any contingencies? Can you plan? Is the state giving you any guidance? Is the Association of Counties giving you any
So
guidance?
last week I was in Albany for the Association of Counties meeting. They have not given us guidance.
Okay.
It seems that they don't know, the state isn't really knowing what's happening. Information is coming out so quickly, and then the courts stop
It's
it or it
bombarded.
continues, right,
Right.
that it's really hard to know what the fallout's going to be. And I talk about unintended consequences. Well, there's a lot of unintended consequences of these actions, and right now the counties, like across New York State, are sitting back and just kind of waiting to see where the axe falls.
So going back to the budget for just a second, forgetting the big elephant in the room, literally, which is 160 Genesee Street and your leases, do you see a gap right now that you're going to have at the end of the year? You're still going to have some tough budget choices.
We still have tough budget choices. So last year,
Without the building.
Without the building. Last year, our tentative budget was $192 million this fall. We cut an additional $1 million out, so we're sitting about 191, and we currently have a $5.3 million budgeted fund draw balance. So we have a deficit of 5.3. Now that's not going to be the end number at the end of the year. Obviously, I'm taking steps to slow down some hiring. We have some ways to hold off on some expenses. We also have programs where we collect interest on money. So there is ways to trim that, but we are going to have to continually reduce our expenditures. However, to balance a budget, everyone says, well, just cut. Well, you just can't cut. They say raise taxes. Well, you just can't raise taxes.
Well, roughly 90% of your budget is mandated.
It is mandated by the state of New York to provide services.
And it's paid, and some of it's paid for that way, but it's passed through. You have a
is.
very small window.
We have a
for what
very
you-
small window that we can actually cut. So we've been looking at those departments. So we can only make so many cuts. You can only raise taxes so much. So that's why I'm so economic development is so important. We have to grow our economy, we have to bring people in, we have to keep growing our tax base and grow our way out of our budget issue.
So you brought it up. County last year cut the Cayuga Economic Development Agency. I think you're in their offices now,
Yep.
where they were. Where there was talk about bringing all the tools back into one toolbox. I'm using some descriptors.
No, it's fair
this
to
way.
say. Yep.
Where are you on that front? Things kind of paused
Yep.
in the fall of last year. Are you back on track? Did you have a one-stop?
We're working to get back on track. Today I spoke with the CCIDA chair, executive director and chair. I also spoke today with CCDC's chair. And we've been talking about the goal is to get back to a one-stop shop. The goal is to back to one roof, to where SBDC, CCDC, and the CCIDA, and for those folks at home, it's the economic development agencies and industrial development agencies. They all have a different job to do. One deals with small business, one float loans, one has to do with buying real estate and getting people into industrial park type settings. So they actually, although they're separate entities, they do work together, and so getting them under one roof is a priority, and I've expressed that again today in my meetings.
And are you having conversation with the city on this? Because I know the mayor was here last week.
Yep.
And
I did speak to Jenny Hayes and Jeff this week regarding the mayor, the city manager, and the city manager, I guess, the next city manager, designee. Maybe that's something eventually we can work on, but right now I need to get the county in under, get the county fixed first.
We only have a couple minutes left.
Sure.
I want to ask you, where is the county on professional management? We mentioned Steve Lynch. He left in the fall. This has been an ongoing item for more than 10 years. Can you give us an overview of your views? I know you were asked that question when you were in the studio.
I was asked that question when I was in the studio. My opinion has not changed. Next month during my State of the County address, I hope to address it further. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. So you have a pathway that you want to.
I do.
Okay.
Correct.
Last question.
Yep.
Kind of broad.
Yeah.
It's almost like the Harry Truman quote when Franklin Roosevelt, the sun, the stars have all fallen on you like a hay bale. What are your goals? What would you tell the public are your goals for the next 9 to 10 months at least?
Well, my big goals, and I wrote a few out today, but really if I wanted to talk to the public, my big goal is to grow our economy. It's to find a way for agriculture and industry to coexist. It's to find a way to bring business here. It's to find a way to have housing here. And the nice thing is, when I say here, I'm talking about all of Cayuga County. One thing that interests me about this project that I just took to our legislature was this was at market housing. This was not for housing that was subsidized. This was at market housing to bring families in that contribute to our community with good income jobs. So that's one of my big goals. My other goal is to continue to work on our budget. We have to get our finances under control where we can, and to continue to work to decrease our spending without sacrificing the services we provide to our public. So those are two challenges there. The other goal I have is to get this legislature and work with the legislature to come up with a plan for 160 Genesee Street so we can determine the future of where our county office building is or where we want it to be.
Well, I hope those are all goals that you've got to accomplish either through necessity or optimism, depending on
We're going to get it done.
We'd love to have you back in the studio
Thank
to
you.
talk about this and give county updates. But our guest has been the new chair of the Cayuga County Legislature. He is going to give his State of the County address through the Chamber of Commerce. You can go on their website to get more details of how you can tune in. But we'd love to have you back in the studio, and we want to thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Over the last half hour. We'll be right back with Jeff Ludwig of the Stewart House to discuss what is going on at that historic site, as well as commemorating the visit in 1825 of the Marquis de Lafayette, who came to Auburn and, oddly enough, met with William Seward. On Thursday, we'll be getting two Albany perspectives. The first one with Will Barkley, the Assembly Minority Leader, and then we'll have Rachel May, the State Senator, who represents all of Cayuga County in the studio as well. Next Tuesday, Jeff Dygert and Jenny Haynes will be in the studio to give us a city update, as well as Bob Scarborough of the YMCA. So stick around. In a few minutes, you'll hear about the Stewart House, but otherwise, we'll see you back here in the studio on Tuesday. And they'll tell us around. So we clearly did not cover